Hello, everyone. This is Hiram Kirkendall. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for MicroAssist here in Austin, Texas. This presentation, The Changing Landscape of Focus Indication, Focus Visible, and the WCAG 2.2, was presented to the Austin Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup. Since we're in the middle of the COVID-19 social distancing effort, we decided to move the presentation online. This gave us an opportunity to experiment with some new presentation technologies and techniques. Since the topic was on focus indication, I took the liberty of moving the introductory part to around 1 hour and 7 minutes. There you will find a summary of issues and observations as well as the recording of the beginning part of the meetup. We have also left on the automated live captions in this section to demonstrate the accuracy in less than optimal conditions. We've replaced the live captions for the main presentation. You will now join the meetup already in progress. Enjoy. I was Paul and I were talking, and I said, well, "Hey, you know what? WCAG 2.2 is coming up, and I was in there poking around. Looks like they're doing focus indication. Would you like me to talk about that at the next meeting?" He goes, "Yeah, that'd be great." And so the more I dug into it, the deeper it got. So I'm going to approach this presentation from as close to a pure compliance perspective as possible. Everything I show you, I'm going to give you a source. And so I don't want you to leave here saying Hiram said. I want you to leave here having the materials to show people if they don't agree with what you're saying or agree with what I'm saying, which is more important. So, how do people create a website? How do you create a web presence? Well, I'd walk into your office and I'd say, "Hey, which of these do you like? Do you like option A or option B?" And you would say, "Well, you know what? I kind of like B, but it's going to be very, very, very organic, and then I'm going to come in, I'm going to say, 'Hey man, we're trying to look hip and cool, like all the other kids.' And, which kind of link do you like?" And you're going to go, "Well, I like A or I like B," right? And then, I'm going to say, "Hey, when I click on the link, it gets this focus indication. I don't know if I really like it. Which do you like?" Right? And so it's this very organic process, but nobody really, takes time to say, well, what do we need for accessibility, right? So if we go back to pre-2008, this was definitely how it works, and it's still kind of the way it is now. So we took back in the dawn of time, we took a look at this and we said there needs to be a better way. And so um, we said we need to come up with some rules behind this. And so, slowly over time, there have been many standards. But the one that seemed to gel was the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or the WCAG, right? And so WCAG 2.0 came out in 2008. So, oh my gosh, the thing is over 10 years old. And so WCAG 2.1 came out in 2018. So you're probably saying, "Hiram, that seems like a long time for nothing to update." Well, actually, a lot of stuff was going on. 2014, we came out with HTML5 and WayAria. There's really no way we could get to an accessible output until we had some better standards. And then, as things evolved, we started applying it to more than just the web. So WCAG is not only applicable to our web, but we also apply it to PDF documents and Microsoft Word documents and PowerPoint and Excel. And I can prove that I didn't document it on this slide, but we can go look at section 508 and we can see what it says about it. So, back in WCAG 2.0, now imagine it's 2008 and nobody's ever really thought about this before. We came up with some very rudimentary guidelines. We said, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to have good contrast just between the text and the background, right? Because we were coming out with some pretty squirrely stuff. So we came out with a principle in WCAG 2.0 called contrast minimum. And it's like its namesake. It is a very minimal specification, but it's very clear. Visual presentation of text and images has a contrast ratio of 4:5:1, except for the following, and we have some things that kind of excluded. So we had to have some tools to kind of figure this out, because that whole contrast ratio of 4:5:1, I'm not going to do the math every time I need to go in there and create a web page, but it was very, very clear. And the other thing we did was we said, okay, we need a visible focus. When I tab and I land on some kind of object, I need to have a visible focus. But now let me tell you, it doesn't say a lot. So we in the industry made up a lot of stuff to go with it, but visible focus says any keyboard operable user interface has a mode of operation where the keyboard focus indicator is visible. And we can look at the understanding, and it's not going to say much more than that. It has a few things in here like it says like so examples of success. We get the vertical bar in a text field, and that's a good indication of focus. So when I click in here, I get the little blinky bar. Oh, you can't see that, can you? I can't tell. You see the little blinky bar? That's focus indication. When a user control receives focus, there's a visible border around it, right? But that's a pretty minimal definition. Now we started it, so the guys and gals working on the W3C said we need to start fixing some of this stuff. And I didn't send you the link to the WCAG. Here, I'll do that real quick because I promised I would do that. So it's just the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but let's get in the habit, right? So we had a gap. We had a gap. It really was not a clear definition. So the W3C started putting out augmenting guidelines, right? And so this was a good one. User interface components that are highlighted by the user agent when they receive focus. So just to prove to you that this is a real thing and this is not me making it up, I'm going to paste it and I'm going to drop it in the chat window. And so this is some additional guidance on success criteria. If you do this, we believe you'll be in compliance. Now, there's a good conversation that we had about normative and informative. The WCAG is normative. The WCAG is what you're held to. These things are informative. If you do this, we think you're compliant. And we can go do a whole spiel on that. But at least with this technique, we can see down here, applies the focus visible. It has this wonderful stuff down here, exactly what we saw about the blinking vertical bar and the dotted line. But there's a line in here, and I'm going to go back to my presentation because I highlighted it. So we're reading all this, and it said, sorry, allergies are kicking up just a little bit, probably because my neighbor's cutting down his world over there. So the objective of this technique is to ensure that the focus component can be visually identified by the user by relying on the user agent support. User agent is going to be a word that we hear over, or set of words we hear over and over again. User agent, for the purposes of this conversation, is going to be your browser. It is common for user agents to highlight standard controls in some way when they receive focus. UAAG conformant user agents do so when they satisfy checkpoints 10.2, highlight section, content focus, enabled elements, visit list. What does that mean? That makes no sense at all, right? And so here it is, it's written in the technique. Well, so back in 2000, whatever, let's don't share our age, but back a long time ago, we had to go look all this stuff up. Well, the WCAG is only one accessibility guideline. So we have an authoring tool accessibility guideline, ATAG. We have a user agent accessibility guideline, UAAG, and the one that I'm kind of going to focus on is UAAG. The user agent accessibility guideline documents, explains how to make user agents accessible to people with disabilities. User agents include browsers, browser extensions, media players, readers, and other applications. So I'm going to copy this into the window, because there's some good stuff in here, right? So right here together, there's the authoring tools, there's the WCAG, and there's the user agents, all bundled together. And this is a nice diagram they have on the W3C site. You can see the accessibility guidelines, ATAG, WCAG, and UAAG, which everybody says UAAG. I've never heard anybody say UGG. Hey, did you do the UGG standard? I don't know. And then underneath that, we have our technical specifications, HTML, WAI ARIA, CSS, SVG, SIML, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go back and let's think about what that said. So the UAG conformant user agents, to do so when they satisfy check. Okay, what this is saying is, now, I'll tell you what, so where we're going with this, if you use default focus indication, I believe you are compliant with WCAG 2.0. And and so I slipped in this slide and I forgot I did that. So we have to remember that, so the WCAG, ATAG, and UAAG is covering Microsoft Word. That's something we fill out with content. It's covering the Acrobat Reader. That's a content editor. It's covering the different ways that we can perceive the web through like Firefox or Safari. And everybody does focus indication a little bit different. I don't know if you've ever loaded a web page in Firefox and then loaded it into Safari or loaded it into Chrome to see what the difference are, but there's subtle difference. Like in Firefox, required fields, when you do a validate, will get a red box around it. If you have default focus indication and you haven't touched it, it will do this by default. Safari, without touching anything, will mark the primary button in a different color from reset button or any other secondary buttons. And so this is this whole default focus indication is a principle that has been gaining popularity, where either the developer has to do the changes, or the developer has to make it accessible, or the user agent, the browser, will take control and make it accessible. And we've seen there's a lot of good examples of that, and I'll show some in a little bit. HTML types, I don't know if you ever played with those, will actually do things for you without changing it. I think I have this in here. I think I'm jumping ahead.
Hiram?
Yes, ma'am.
The user agents are the browsers?
The user agents are the browsers. It's this kind of weird definition right here. So the user agents include browsers, browser extensions, media players, readers, and other applications that render web content. So I mean, I stole that straight off of the site. I'm not clever enough to write that.
Thank you.
Such as screen readers.
Now, screen readers are a different technology. They're not a user agent. I don't think a screen reader is a user agent. I tell you, let's save that one to the end. They're a consumer of the accessibility API that is rendered by a browser, that is definitely rendered by a user agent. But I don't know if they're actually considered to be a user agent.
Yeah, in that diagram, it shows it in between the person and the browser.
Oh yeah, here we go. Look, that's the reason we've got Phil on the line. He probably drew this. He's probably the author of it.
Well, I've seen it so many times that I never realized that there's actually a blue arrow and a blue thing to the left and a white thing to the right to separate UAG and ATAG and WCAG. Yep.
I should have made it bigger, but so let's keep marching on. So we looked at this, and under 2.0, just a visible focus indication is just too weak, right? So we go, okay, we're gonna get them. We're gonna amp this sucker up, right? So we're gonna put some additional things on here. So when we move onto a text field or a link or something to receive focus, we get much better visibility. So WCAG 2.1 came along, and a brand new success criteria came out. 1.4.11, non-text contrast. And we're like, aha, it's here, we're gonna do it. And so the visual representation of the following have a contrast ratio of 3:1. So if I was to go over here and show you the success criteria, boink, boink. It says the visual presentation of the following have a contrast ratio of 3:1 against adjacent colors. And we're like, oh man, we're cooking now. And look, there's a user interface component and there's a graphic objects component. And so we go in here under how to understand, and there's some good stuff in here, right? So we come down here, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling. I know, I'm trying not to make everybody dizzy. But we come down here and we get to the active user face examples, and it's showing us, hey, you know, if we have non-text contrast, we need to have a 3-to-1 ratio between the foreground and background. And it comes down here and it talks about graphics. How do we, you know, normally pie charts are all stuck together, and we, you know, we can't really always tell where one slice ends and the other doesn't. So now we're going to have this non-text contrast where we say, okay, not only does this need to have, you know, 3-to-1 between foreground and background, but I need to have a contrast ratio between the individual slices. So we're cooking. We're like going, oh man, this is good stuff. And then we read the criteria a little closer. So what I did was I just pulled out of the understanding document and the text off here. Actually, let me go back and let me grab that again, because I want to read this one straight off the screen, and then I'm going to come in here and read that one. Oh, almost did it. One more. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to read the user interface components. Visual information required to identify the user interface component, and states, except for inactive components. Now that's actually really good. So when a component's inactive and you're not supposed to touch it, none of this counts. You can do whatever you want to there. Just gray it and it's fine. Or where the appearance of the component is determined by the user agent, which is good. So if it's something you can click on or something takes focus, it is covered. And not modified by the author. What is that? Who stuck that on there? What does that mean? That actually got a little worse. So coming into that example where they're showing you what you need to do in order to, what you're obligated to do. Well, there's the first part that, you know, for a link text, you know, if you have 1.3 contrast, 1.4.3 minimum contrast applies. So that's good. That's the 4.5 to 1. And an underline is sufficient to indicate a link. So that's good. That just kind of, that's good. So you put a native link on the screen, you're in good shape. But guess what? We read down a little further and it says the links are required to have focus indicator by 247 visible focus, where the focus style of the user agent is not adjusted on inactive controls, such as links and form fields of buttons, unless, I'll put a comma, so I'll say the word unless, the default focus style is sufficient. So, you know, you can interpret that in many ways, but most people are interpreting that as the default focus style is sufficient. And because it's going to go down to the next line, and it's going to say a focus indicator is required if the focus indicator is styled by the author, it must meet the 3-to-1 contrast ratio. So they wrote it backwards, right? So they say a focus indicator, so you have to do this if you have styled the default, if you've styled and overridden the default focus indication. So right now, the way most of us are interpreting non-text contrast is by a very simple principle. If you touch it, you have to be compliant with this. If you don't touch it, you are compliant. And that's actually a little bit of a problem. Let's take a first of all, let's go in and let's just do this real quick, just so we're kind of clear on how, you know, everything that we have to do around focus. I took time to make the screen. It doesn't fit, but I'm going to do it anyway because it took time to make the screen. So we have the label, right? So what would the label fall under? 1.4.3 minimum contrast, right? 4.5 to 1. So that's the first thing we have to do. Next thing is we got the text in the box. Got black text on a white background. That's good, right? But that's still text. So that's that non-focus. So that's that 1.4.3 contrast minimum. Now we have the box on the outside, right? So little tricky here. That is non-text. That is non-text contrast. So I'll give you that, but there is kind of an out on it. You know, the border without focus, active user interface components, and it's visual information provided that is necessary for users to identify. So if you have fields on a screen and you don't have a border around it, you can say, look, it's just not necessary. People will know where this field is, and that's kind of an out there. But if if you do have a border on there, then that would fall under non-text contrast. But the important one is our focus indication. So our focus indication has to have a 3-to-1 from the foreground to the background. That's all really good stuff. And so what we did early on was, me and a couple other people sat down and we figured out what are all the different ways that you can pass or fail this particular guideline. So here we have, like, here's a link text and it's underlined. Underlined sufficient. Here's text that's not underlined, but it has a 3-to-1 contrast ratio between it, the text next to it, and the text behind it. So it can stand alone. You can use a graphic. So you can stick a graphic in there. That's a good way to indicate. You can make it a different size. You can make it larger than the other text, or you can make it on the bottom. You can just put the word link in there. That's fine with me. I don't care. And then there's that whole thing that we did on the bottom, down here. So, here's all the ways that you can pass this thing. So all that's good. But remember, the only time we have to do that is if we've changed the default focus indication. So, guess what we get all the time now? It used to be when we got a website to look at for auditing, it always had all kinds of crazy focus indication. I can't tell you the last time I got a website that did not have a default focus indication. And the reason is nobody wants to hassle with it. Now, the problem is, oops, I'm not gonna be able to get to it. I put my example behind the tool, these little tools that you can't see for oops. All right, doesn't matter. I was going to show you an example. Let me grab it real quick. Embarrassing, humiliating. I thought I moved all those. -5. Everybody's going to put this in the notes. It was great until Hiram stopped the presentation and had to move his little examples. So, here's an example. So I click through here. Okay, I can see that. There's a blue bar. All right, I'm there. I can see it. But what happens if I turn this thing dark? I can't see that focus indication. That's blue on the exact same blue. Right now, we would not fail that, even though it is clearly not sufficient, because we're taking a very hardline look at all this, right? Now, advocates, as an advocate, we will put in the report all kinds of stuff about, if we see a failure, we'll put stuff in there, but default is sufficient. Dun, 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 dun. So what's our rule? Default is sufficient for focus indication under WCAG 2.1, and we kind of adopted the retail model. You break it, you bought it, right? So, so if you don't touch it, it's fine. Well, that's terrible. We really can't let that stand. So what can we do? All right. So this is the hard part. This is actually Phil. I'm picking on him. This is what Phil does all day long for IBM, is he sits there and he works with these groups, figuring out how do we fix this stuff in this very complex real world environment. And he's a friend and I can pick on him. And so I have two choices. I can go to the vendor community and say, guys, fix your browser. And that's exactly what Phil put into the little blog helper thing earlier this week. Chromium has come in and they've had added extensions. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve this thing. And this is fantastic, because if they solve the focus indication problem, then developers don't have to worry about it. So here we see in this example, it was white and there was a good focus indication. Then it became dark and we still have a clear focus indication. This is what we kind of want to happen. We want to take this from the developer, and we want to give it to the user agent and let them handle it, right? That's a fantastic thing. And there's been lots of examples. So this is the earlier one that came out. So that Paul kind of referenced. Microsoft is kind of flying the flag, surrender flag, and they're using Chromium now in Edge, right? And so here's kind of the exact same thing where they're coming through here and they're showing you how they're building in this these more accessible controls, right? So let's get it off the developer and let's get it into the browser. And that is great because the developer doesn't have to worry about it. They implement this control and it's just done. So we're super excited about that. And then here's Paul. Paul actually was very gracious enough to go ahead and test it. And I didn't realize you have to have a different browser. So this isn't going to work, Paul, right? So this is, I get a slightly different focus indication, but you get a much darker one on yours, right?
That's just to test like how different browsers will show them. The left is enhanced with CSS, the middle is your default browser, and then the right is if it's just totally removed. So it's just so you could see that.
Okay, okay.
But Safari and Chrome work differently.
Okay.
Hiram, transfers across the 3 columns.
Okay, so
So
this
we can compare apples to apples.
Yeah, yeah. So here we have a much more enhanced focus indication. It's very clear, and I can see it. Then I get to the second column, and you can see that's default. That's good old fashioned. Just this is what the browser produces. And right now I'm flipping between the open and close. I mean, my vision's pretty good, and I can see it, but I would not. It's not great. And the last one, there's absolutely no focus indication at all, right? So, and then if if I was to go in here and change the background, I wouldn't be able to see any of these, right? So, how many years we've been working on this? So our browser community is being a little slow out of the gate, right? So they're just now kind of coming up with these ideas that come and go. So let's see. All right. Okay. We got a choice. Somebody's got to fix this because we got a gap, right? We can't leave default. So let's see who's got pressure points. Let's see. Okay. The development community. Well, I actually do have the Americans with Disabilities Act and a messed up box here apparently too. Look, there's an accessibility issue right there. I got the Rehabilitation Act. I got the Air Carrier Access Act. So let's see. I can keep chasing these people who haven't done anything, or I have developers who are hiring people and I can get under Title I, or state entities and I can go after under Title II, or private sector companies and I can just go ahead and file a lawsuit on Title III, or Rehabilitation Act. So if you're a school, I can get you under 504. Or if you want to sell under federal government, I can get you under 508. So let's see, who am I going to go after next? Am I going to go after these guys, or am I going to after these guys? So who's going to get the surprise? Whoop. I worked hard on that animation right there. The ice cream cone goes to the user, goes to the developer. Now, don't be clapping. I saw you clapping on that. We should all be really angry and ticked off because really, this would make it easy for everybody and we get it equally applied. But so let's do gossip now. Okay, so we're kind of done with what I believe is the current state, and I've tried to document it as well as I can to show you that's not just me making stuff up, right? So somebody said, hey, WCAG 2.2 is out for public review, and I was like, wow, really? Okay, I'm all over that. So I jumped on WCAG 2.2, and I'm going to prove to you that WCAG 2.2 is out in the public. This isn't me just making things up. And WCAG 2.2, was, well, actually I can show you on here. So first public working draft came out in February. That's pretty good stuff. Nice and clean and all new. I lost track of where I was. Okay, so WCAG 2.2, I thought WCAG 2.2 was going to all be about cognitive and learning disabilities and low vision. And all of a sudden, it comes out and it actually doesn't have any of this stuff. I haven't seen any of this yet. I mean, everybody's working very hard on it. But what is in WCAG 2.2, and this is on that same page, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the direct link because I promised I would do that. So what are the new features coming out? Focus Visible Enhanced. Heck yeah. What does that mean? Oh, look at this. When a user interface component displays a visible keyboard focus, all of the following are true. So guess what? The browser people got off the hook again. Dadgummit. And we're going to drop this in our developer's lap. So the minimum area, the focus indication area, is greater than or equal to the longest side of the bounding rectangle of the focus control times 2 CSS pixels. What is that? Focus contrast, color changes used to indicate focus have a 3:1 contrast ratio with the colors changed from the unfocused control. Okay. Contrast thickness, the focus indication area has 3:1 contrast ratio against all adjacent colors for the minimum area or greater, or has a thickness of at least 2 pixels. All right, what are these knuckleheads talking about? So let's kind of just go slowly through it, and let's see if we can't figure it out, right? So the first thing I want to point out, because I've been thinking about this. You made me think about this. I didn't have to do it. It wasn't time. This is not even out yet. But because Paul suckered me into doing this, I mean, because Paul recommended me to do this. Okay, because Paul twisted my arm and I did this, I read it very carefully. When a user interface component displays a visible keyboard focus, all the following are true. So for those of us that have to read legislation, we know the difference between shall and will and may and can. Words matter, right? All the following are true. So that minimum area, the focus contrast, and the focus thickness all have to be true. And you can read on the what is a CSS pixel. It's just we're just going to kind of let that slide now. But they, you know, the W3C really just does such a good job of documenting all the various words in there. And so, you know, you can go read that at your leisure. We're going to kind of let it slide a little bit for right now because it's just a tad bit nerdy. So a while ago, I noticed that my way ARIA authoring practice patterns changed. And I was like, it was very subtle. They did it very quietly. They didn't announce it. They just did it. And I was like, oh, hey, look what happened to tabs. I now have some different kinds of focus indication. Well, that's very kind of them. Let's take a look at one. So, oh, I didn't copy this in here. I'm sorry. If you don't know about the way ARIA practice 1.1 guides, you are not living. You just have not lived a full life. This site has all of the major patterns that you could possibly want. A modal dialog box coded correctly, brilliant. Menus, when you don't like your menu and you go to the developer and go, your menu's horrible, and they go, prove it, you got a pattern. And not only do these have patterns, indulge me for 1 minute. Not only do these have a pattern that you can go through and you as a developer can experience and try and work with, it also has very nice testing guidelines for your QA staff. Enter activates the menu. A space bar takes you down. A down arrow does this. Very, 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 very nice stuff. It helps everybody. So if you haven't played with this site, you're in for a real treat. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the tab panel. What did I do wrong? Oops, I'm sorry.
That's a specification.
That is a specification. I got lost. I'll tell you what, when you get lost, you come back in and you start all over again. It's hard to present and click around. Take me down to the right place. Okay, where is it? Example. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Tabs with manual activation. So this is a pretty sweet little example. So I'm not on this little tab panel yet, but I can clearly see there is a blue line on there because I'm sighted and I'm not colorblind. I can see it's a blue indication. So I'm going to tab to it. No longer blue, I'm orange. And what happened? There's a visible change to the side. Well, where did that come from? Now, if I want to move into the tab panel, I can hit enter. Is this the automatic one? I thought this was. Yep. Oh, okay, hit tab. I hit tab, and now I have moved into the content, and look what happened. My previous orange focus indication is now blue, and my secondary indication is now orange, so I know where I am. You sneaky little buggers. They have been slowly preparing for the onslaught of this new 2.4.11 focus indication. So let's take their example apart and see if it works. Let's see if they did a good job. So the first thing is the minimum focus area indication is greater than or equal to the longest side of the bounding rectangle of the focus control times 2 CSS pixels. I'll be honest with you. I have looked at this, and I just seriously do not understand how to pull this off. So what they're doing is, and I'm going to try to say what I think is my interpretation. I'm letting you know we're leaving for sure, and we're kind of going to the weirdness. So I think what they're saying is they're all about the area, right? So it's 3 times, the example is the following 3 examples use 90 pixel wide by 30 pixel tall buttons. Therefore, the surface area requirement is 180 pixels. Now, the key there is the surface area requirement. They're not saying that the outline has to be 3 pixels, but or has to be this 180 pixels. What they're saying is the area has to be that. So if you were to calculate the area of this line, it should be 180 pixels. If you were to calculate the area of this underline, it'd be 180 pixels. If you were to calculate the surface area of this box, it'd be 180 pixels. I have no idea how we're going to pull this off. So in modern coding, we don't really make things pixel width, right? Now, there's some smart people out there. Somebody's going to figure it out. Just like we're like, how do we do color contrast? And the Paciello group made a tool, and you click on the foreground, the background. It did all the hard math for us, and it told us, right? But you know, I went to their example, and I went into the CSS, and I just hard coded it for 200 pixels. And so this is kind of changing, all right? So I don't know how we're going to pull it off, but I can kind of see it. Okay, fine. You know, we can do it as an underline. We can do it as a box. We can do it here. It's going to be an area thing. We probably won't get it mostly, perfect, but I see where you're going with that. Okay, so we're going to let you slide on that one because I can't figure out how to fail you. I'm going to let you slide on that one. By the way, if anybody disagrees with any of this, it's a meetup. Just holler out. So minimum area. So I'm going to give their little example a pass on minimum area because I don't know how to fail it. So, okay, let's go back for a minute. Let's drop back to WCAG 2.0. Let's do some easy stuff, right? So focus visible. I got a bar. I'm good on 2.0. Non-text contrast. I'd use my little Paciello color contrast analyzer, and that's a pretty good orange. It actually passed. I was kind of surprised. Orange is a color it's very hard to get past, but it passed. So at least hurdle 1 and 2, we've kind of gotten through. Now let's get to the next one. So focus contrast. Remember, all 3 of these things have to be true in order to pass this thing. So color changes. So color changes used to. I bored somebody. They just bailed off. They're like, no way, we're not doing this. So focus contrast. Color changes used to indicate focus have at least a 3-to-1 contrast ratio with the colors changed from the unfocused control. So let's kind of walk through this. Okay, I was on this bar and it was orange, and I tabbed and it moved me down into this area. This became unfocused. This became focused. So my kind of interpretation of that is, well, all right, fine. Let's take a look. Let's get practical about this. All right, let me close some things here. if I were, you know, truly colorblind, like I had no color perception at all, am I going to be able to tell the state of this? Okay, I do. I get a little bar. Okay, I'm seeing the whole 3 pixel thing. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I figured it out. And when I go in here, I don't really know that I can tell the difference between this color and this color. This is my inactive color. I'm over there. This is my focus indication, right? And I mean, I can go through here and I can do the various, and this is the No Coffee simulator. It's a Chrome plugin, very nice one. Everybody should have it loaded. It's just an empathy tool. You don't really use it for testing, but it's fun. So, I mean, I can go through here and I can run through all the different kinds of color challenges. And so I would not say that there's an overwhelming difference between there. So, and then the unfocused and focused states, so this was had a box around it that was gray, and when I tabbed to it, it became orange, right? So using my little color contrast analyzer, I didn't pass between blue and orange. I certainly don't pass between gray and orange. And so the last hope I have is, you know, maybe this, you know, like between the white and the gray here, you know, maybe that's a thing. Nope, it doesn't pass either, right? So I'm gonna have to say, now, nobody's done any presentations on this. This is a meetup. We're just gossiping, right? I cannot honestly say that this passes color contrast as it's described here. I do not have a 3-to-1 contrast ratio between the colors when they're changing focus and unfocused states. So because there's 3 things that are required, the first one we gave them, the second one we're not going to give them, so it doesn't really matter what the third one says. You know, at least right now my thinking is this would not pass.
Oh, but I think it's between the border. The way I interpret it was the blue underline tells you which tab has focus, right?
Right.
But when then you jumped into it, it went from gray to orange. So you're saying the gray to orange is not 3-to-1?
The gray to orange is not 3-to-1.
Yes, I agree with you there.
I mean,
other than the bottom of the tab has that big fat orange.
Exactly. But what was the rule? The rule was all 3 of these things have to pass. I mean, we're being very picky because all we're trying to do is like an empathy piece. You know, we haven't really got much guidance on this. You know, and it's also fun. You know. So, but we get the idea. Now our heart is in the right place. I do have focus indication, and even if I go in and I turn off, well, don't use that one. I go in here and I simulate a complete lack of color. I actually do kind of know where I am. So that is vastly improved over anything that we got. And look, so I have using my arrow keys. I'm going back and forth. I know where I am. So the one on the left is the tallest one. Is my previous focus. Is my one that currently has the focus. And now as I move through, that's the one that's in the foreground, and then this is my focus. I'm moving it around, and then I click and then tab. And so actually, you know, a really pretty sweet little pattern. So, but I'm not gonna, tentatively, I'm not gonna give them this one, just because I haven't really thought it through. And I mean, this is it. I thought it through. This is it. this is what I thunk. So the last one is one of those. It's the one I call the legalese one, right? So the third one is contrast thickness. The focus indication area has a 3-to-1 contrast ratio against all adjacent colors for the minimum area or greater, or has a thickness of 2 CSS pixels. So had they not said, you had you had to do all 3 of these, I actually think that the previous pattern would have passed because I had a pixel change. So when I moved down into the content area, oh, come on. when I move down the content area, I got this nice bar on the bottom. Let's pretend like that's 3 pixels, okay? I would have said this is solid. Okay, I moved down there. I got greater than 2 CSS pixels. That qualifies. The problem is you have to go all the way back up to that original statement, which was all of the following are true. And I'm being very persnickety and precise, right? So number 1, fine. Number 2, I think we need to have further conversations on it. I think I'd get them on a technicality, right? And then number 3, you got an OR statement there. I would say that's greater than 2 CSS pixels. So I'd probably go for that. So wow, that was all very
Hiram,
fast. Yes, ma'am.
with the hang on, see if I can. Well, the bottom pixel, it looks like the bottom and the top would be, for example, 3 pixels, whereas the sides would be 2 pixels, and so that showing the 3 pixel solid is indicating that is the selected area.
Yes.
Could that perhaps be how they're doing it? So 2 pixels to show that this is selected or whatever, and then the 3 pixels is showing the focus.
That's definitely the intent, right? So we need to have, and remember, so it's kind of this whole weird thing. I got a surface area part of this, right? Which is the surface area has to add up to a certain number of pixels. Right? It's some kind of math that I can't figure out because I don't actually make static boxes anymore. But we'll work through that. We'll figure that out. So the surface area would be the first one, and then within the surface area, we need to have this height in there in order to get past this third criteria. And so, well, how do we feel about all this?
We need further light and knowledge from our spec writers and from their example. And I guess you can open up a Git issue against the best practices widget they built.
Well, 2.2 there now, Phil. So thank goodness you're on here. So this is all okay. So Phil said, I didn't get this on the open caption. So Phil said that really the right thing to do is to first of all go open up a ticket against that pattern, and that's a good thing to do. We'll take care of that. And then the next thing is WCAG 2.2 is currently out for public review, right? So that's the authoring practices, and that's going to be something else. Here we go. So, I mean, it's out, it's a public working draft. So at some point, they're going to follow a process and they're going to ask for opinions on all these things. And, where it looks like reading tea leaves, and remember, this is a meetup, this isn't a class, we're just kind of all gossiping, is that default focus indication is not going to be sufficient for the future. And then the other bullet I put on here, and I took it back off, which is, I don't think they're going to put any super pressure on the user agent community, on the browser community, to get default focus fixed. And I heard a very smart person one time explain why in the browser they could not just simply detect the foreground and background color and then adjust the focus indication based on that. And it all sounded good to me at the time, but it just seems kind of intuitive that if you can figure out all those CSS layers, you can render a particular color, that somehow you should be able to know that is the top color in the Z order. And
yeah. So I got a question but the real answer is that the user should be able to change their setting the way they want it. And we got to go back to Microsoft or the Chromium team and tell them, okay, you did a lot with this 2-color bar, a black and a white line that does the 2-color, so that
exactly.
shows it the way. But then to let the user say, okay, I want 4 pixels or I want 8 pixels. Some users want that visible indicator. A lot of advocates are always demonstrating with these big yellow bars, but there are people with cognitive disabilities that get distracted.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
absolutely.
like yelling, what's the squirrels? A bunch of dogs, right?
Right. Well, Jim Allen used to always say, look, I want to be able to go in and I want to be able to change my own font. And you can't do that. They did make, there are plugins. Like if I go in, this is actually used, to test resizing of the website. It's just the, what's it called? Oh my God, No Squint. Had a senior moment there. No Squint. And I can actually come in here and I can change all kinds of interesting things. Like I can change the text background, and as long as you haven't you haven't overridden it, I can change this, and it will stay with me. Or like the links, and so this will be something that kind of floats around with me. And so that's kind of what we're talking. That's also what we're talking about, with this automated captioning. Having it on your phone, give the user control, give the user options, and let them handle it the way they want to. So I agree with you, and that's the reason we kind of want to use default focus indication, because if the developer does it, I can't override it. So the whole concept of default is actually brilliant. I mean, somebody was in a back room and they go, oh, you know what? We shouldn't change any of this. And everybody goes, oh, you know what? You're right. We have other specifications that cover user agents that we can hold them accountable to. And then if a person wants to override it, they'll be able to. It's brilliant. So that's the reason I'm a little confused by why, why suddenly WCAG 2.2 comes out and we have this default focus indication here. And the only thing I can think of was that horrible slide I put back together here, with who gets the poo tree. I only have two groups. Right, either the developer does it or I have the vendor community do it. And
yeah, I think you're on the back room revelation that the lawyers can go after people, right? But the federal government can't go after the browser guys. They have no stick. And,
I know.
and you don't buy the browser, right? It comes for free, and so there's no leverage.
That's it.
So one way to do it is the advocacy groups can just go out there and say, we're going to boycott or, yell at all these browser manufacturers and tell them how terrible they are because they don't do the right thing. Microsoft came along and played hero here and did all this work for Chromium, and Google shared in their credit. But, we need to figure out a way to go beat up the browser guys. They're just not playing, they're not doing their fair share.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't think it really crystallized to me until I did this presentation that I'm like, you know what? Why isn't why isn't the vendor community doing this? And it really became clear that all my leverage points are on developers, and that's the place those are the people I don't want. I don't want them to do it. I actually don't want them to touch it. I mean, we could do, when you override it, you've taken away control of the user from the user, right?
Yeah.
And so
if also you're fighting three companies, Safari, Chromium, and Firefox versus 300 million developers.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And the worst part, and I was being a little bit of a Budinsky, but I mean everybody's caught in the web, right? So we have all these laws, and so it's easy to go after the developer. I see people typing. I don't know what it says. Paul, anything in there that, oh, you're handling it. Paul's handling it. Okay, I'm going to let it go. But
a bunch of comments.
Okay.
I don't know that there are questions specifically, but yeah, everyone's just.
Yeah. Are you aware of any plugins that do this for you, that help the user override or enhance the default focus?
Yeah. So I mean,
we built one 10 years ago for IE because it didn't work in IE, but it worked in everywhere else. And so the federal government actually, forced IBM in a bid to actually provide the plugin and support it so that their IE users could use this feature that wasn't supported in IE.
Right.
It was supported in Firefox and Chrome, but they didn't roll out Firefox and Chrome, so we couldn't rely on that, or they couldn't rely on it for their end users. So we had to, put it in IE for IE. No.
I at one time, and my answer is this is the only thing I've seen actually, no squint, and I think it's an incidental thing that you can go in and you can do this, and it does basically, it's kind of doing a
But it's not doing focus
JavaScript
indicator,
into. It's not doing focus indication. It's just
Yeah.
doing link colors. But would that be nice? It's so close.
Well,
And,
maybe has Paul heard of a focus indicator plugin?
Paul makes
Or
one.
anybody
Paul
else?
makes one. So like, here's what I do when now, it's a one-time thing. It's only once per page, but I'm showing you that it can be done. So Paul came in and said, you know what? I'm having trouble testing all this stuff because I get pages all the time with no focus indication. So here's an example. I took Paul's focus indication. I made a reverse one, and now I think he did too. So now I have no focus indication. I can't even test this application, at least not easy. So he just wrote a little JavaScript bookmarklet. And by the way, if you haven't gone to pauljadams.com and gotten these, you absolutely have to have these, because what this did was it just did a little JavaScript injection of CSS. And look, now I've got focus indication. So Paul is like 75% of the way, and this of the way of doing exactly what you want.
Like that's built into Safari. You could customize your own focus outline for all websites if you wanted to, like make them orange everywhere. It's just most people don't do that anymore. It's kind of like an old school technique of using user style sheets.
I've never got my own individual user style sheets to work. I tried doing that, and it was so.
Browser or what? But I can get them to work in Safari fine.
Oh, can you in Safari? Well, that's the problem is you Mac people, you aggravate the rest of us. So I tried to do it with Chrome. There's a style sheet behind Chrome, and I tried to go in and change the default style sheet, and all I did was make a mess and break Chrome. So, there's really, the great thing about a meetup is there's not always necessarily a takeaway, other than I do have the big takeaway. All right, so my big takeaway is. Right now, we're all getting away with default focus indication. And if I understand WCAG 2.2, and if I was even close, default focus indication would not be acceptable at some point in the future. And if we were going to make a stink about something, this might be the one. This might be the one to do it on. So anyway, anybody have any additional questions, comments, anything else you'd like to discuss? I'm here all night. I ran everybody out of the house, and I have full control of the internet.
I just want to say, that improvement they put in Chromium, I think we ought to toot our horns, toot the horns about it, maybe put it in more like, hey, here's the default, here's what they did to improve the default, and so that there's some groundswell around that when you flip between white on black and black on white, the dark and light, it still works, which is
the simplest fix to this, and it thank you for saying that, Phil, because when I looked at it, I go, oh, you know what they're doing? Imagine you do a border, it's half black, it's half white.
Yep.
No matter what you put it on, one or the other is going to show up. It's brilliant. Why are we doing that? And it wasn't until you sent that I'm like, oh my gosh, the fix is simple. If you could
sandwich.
Yeah, it is.
Linda mentioned the sandwich where it's like black, white, black, or white, black, white, depending on what the exterior contrast needed to be.
Exactly.
This is Casey Hunt. I work at Indeed, and one of the issues we ran into with this exact technique is we wanted to use the double border so that we could have contrast regardless of. I'm actually working on building components for a design system, so this is exactly what we needed to do, was to ensure some rigidity for these components, regardless if they got put on a white or a black background. This was the first idea we thought of. The problem was we have buttons, for example, that have a primary, secondary, and tertiary variant. And the secondary and tertiary variant also need that border property in order to render as the designers have designed them. So of course we reach for the outline property, which cannot be, you can't have more than one. And it also doesn't render the same as borders. So I would love to see outline be looked at again and have a little bit more robustness built into it.
And you know, I've seen, so this is, I think it's still using the outline property, so I'm not actually helping you at all. But I've seen where they pull the border into the button as opposed to leaving the outside alone. They pull it into the button. And so, but that's just semantics. It's still using the same properties.
Yeah, we've used inset shadow as another way around this, is to create a solid inset shadow. But it's just like, the outline property was designed for this purpose, and we've all but abandoned it because it's got so many limitations. And now we're trying to kludge like inset shadow and border together in order to both achieve our visual design and our functional accessibility.
Exactly. You know, because then, you know, you go, well, you know, we could just make a graphic, and then let's just, you know, oh my gosh, now we've completely, oh my gosh, welcome to the 90s, right?
Yeah. I have another question. I've seen some problems where you have selected and focused, kind of like what you're doing with that tab.
Yes,
like, you know, there was
right.
it's selected it, and then if you don't select it, but you move the focus on the selected item, then all of a sudden you get these weird problems where you get black text on black backgrounds because black was used to identify the selected item.
Right.
But when it gets focus, you're flipping it, and it's like, wow, there's some differences between receives focus and you know, the tab is kind of funny how it goes from, you know, blue to orange in that demo, whether it's selected or whether it has focus. Yeah.
You know, and you know, one of the problems that we've always had with I actually put this on this toolbar. I don't know why I'm going through all this pain and suffering. You know, one of the problems we have in development is we get our UI designers, and our UI designers, they're really thinking hard about it. And a good UI designer may give us a color for focus, but they never think it all the way through. What is it before I get there? What is it when I have the focus? What is it when I leave, yet something still remains in an active state, right? Nobody thinks about all the states. I've never gotten a complete style guide, and I've had people that work really hard, but it's just hard to think of all the different patterns that go with
well, Casey, though, Indeed, are you doing this on your framework? You're taking into consideration all the different states?
Yeah, so I was just about to say, what I've started doing is I'm what's known as a design technologist. So I am equal parts designer and engineer. So I have the luxury of being able to kind of play both roles. But for my purebred designers, what I've started doing is kind of delivering a matrix of states that are, some of them are combinatorial states. So you have like for example, what you all are talking about is you have an active pseudo state in simultaneous to a focus state. You also have those two things independent. So you can actually kind of build out this very short life cycle, which is just a matrix of all of these states, and call them that. Say, here is where you have your hover, here is your focus, here is your focus and your hover, here is your hover and your focus and your active. And you can just draw out a matrix of these states and say, you need, as a designer, to think about all of these.
Paul is looking for people to do meetup talk. If you were to come back and do that, I know I would definitely be one of the first people to jump on the sign up.
Yeah, you come in an interesting time. We're actually in the midst of a complete rebuild. Well, we have been. I think anyone that was at a few meetups ago where I was at, we were talking about how we're in the midst of a complete redesign of our design system. We're still doing that.
And you know, the other interesting thing, and then I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox. Is, you know, a lot of people really give a lot of credibility to automated testing tools. And we work with a lot of them, you know, and they're good. They're great at catching technical failures. They are never going to do this. They are never going to be able to really truly interpret the focus indication, and you know, they can't even really tell if you have focus indication or you don't have focus indication. And it's probably a good indication of you know, we say, browsers, why don't you know, just detect what the background color is, and then flip and do the other color on the other spectrum for me. Well, if we can't get, you know, all these smart people can't get these automated testing tools to be able to detect focus indication is even there, you know, maybe it is a lot to ask of the browser, the user agent community. But I gotta believe down somewhere inside of me that this is something that just should be able to be solved.
We've got CSS blend modes. They just don't work in many browsers. So
that's true. There you go. That's right. That's right.
When we're
Oh.
talking, the yellow highlight shows around my picture on Zoom, but I don't think I can change that. It's kind of a yellow green. It's kind of
Yeah.
Probably
a
not
funky
sufficient
border.
contrast.
Kind of shifts and changes.
All right. Well, I tell you what, I can't thank everybody enough for hanging in this long and listening to my ramblings. Does anybody object to me posting this video, or would you? I don't think anybody said anything too controversial.
No, I have
I'd
no
love it
objection.
posted. I'd love it posted.
Okay, because it's a meetup. It's not a class, and I want to respect our user community. Maybe I'll send out a quick notice to just on the board and just see if anybody has any objections. Especially since I made fun of Phil for half of the presentation.
I feel famous.
He's going to be like, no, you do not post that. Okay. Well, hopefully you made a friend today. I'm sorry it went so fast. I didn't set the time right and everybody got sucked back too quick. So, but on the next meetup, we'll stay a little longer and let everybody have a chance to introduce each other.
We have to stay longer so I can read all of the books that's on Julianne's bookshelf.
Oh,
I'm about halfway down. There we go.
I have a whole nother one here, a whole nother one in the living room. And then books
That's
piled
like
other places.
rule number 7 on this Zoom list. Is if you have a background with your bookshelf, then everyone will try to read all your books.
Okay, you troublemakers. I'm signing off unless anybody's got anything else. Okay, a few technical notes on the virtual meeting experiments. Here are a few of the mistakes and observations noted during the review. One, we needed more time for virtual introductions in the room. 3 minutes per person was about right. 5 people per room, so 5 times 3 is 15 minutes should have been allocated. The Zoom polls do not show up in the recording. Who knew? Last minute laptop swap caused the camera angle to change. Yes, those mini blinds are from Home Depot. Did not repeat the screen content. That's a WCAG 1.2.2 captions pre-recorded failure. I did an ugly voiceover to fix that. If you have books in your background, everyone will try to read them. That's Phil's Zoom rule number 7. The Microsoft Presentation Translator extension for PowerPoint worked fairly well. Needs training for acronyms like WCAG. This was an unrehearsed meetup, far more stumbling over words and phrases than usual. The extension did take out a lot of the ums. You can find it using Google keywords Presentation Translator and download. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and get started because the first part of this is we want to talk a little bit about the technology we put in place to kind of make all of this happen. So the first thing you'll notice is that we're giving the PowerPoint automated closed captioning a shot. This is a plugin that you can put in PowerPoint. It takes forever to configure. It takes it like 30 minutes the first time you do it to configure, but it does a good job. If you want to keep the closed captioning just to see what really interesting accessibility is like, where you give the user control, you can take a picture of this little 3D barcode or type this into your phone, and you can actually get your closed captioning on your phone. So imagine you're at a conference and the board is a million miles away, and you could actually get this where you are. So personalization, that's probably the coolest thing to come along. Okay, and that's what it looks like when you start the closed captioning service in PowerPoint. It'll pop up with this little screen. So let's do a poll. So how many of you have used Zoom before? Let's see. Well, come on down now. Where are my polls? There's my poll. Don't embarrass me. Launch poll 1. So how many of you have used Zoom before? Oh. Sweet. I didn't think about how I'm going to share the results with you on this because you can't see it, can you? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open Word while y'all are answering so I can copy and paste it in there.
When I've used the poll before, I was able to share. So there's an
Oh, are you? Okay. Well, I tell you, I'm going to end
fine.
this poll and then, share results. Look at that. Can everybody see it? the poll
Yes.
results?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's good, about 50-50. Some people use it every day, some have some experience. So let me ask you a harder question. So have you ever used...
And then we can close it individually, I believe. Or is
Oh,
that-
okay. So everybody needs to close their own polls. So stop sharing results. This went really smooth in the when I'm doing it all by myself. So how many people have actually used it for like an interactive meetup? So you actually did something interactive, not in listen only mode. Oh, wow. That's great. I didn't realize that. I thought usually I'm in presentation mode only, or it's part of a meeting and we're just talking back and forth. Fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and share this out. Okay. Wow. So basic meetings. All right. So we're going to go over a few basic things then. So this is a meetup. It's not a class. So it's intended to be interactive. I want you to speak up when you have something to say. If you want to circle something on the screen and ask me a question, I want you to be able to do that. So just kind of going over the controls. The first thing you need to know is the mute button. It looks like everybody has this down. Wow. Okay. So this is not your first rodeo. Chat window, you can chat back and forth, everybody. If you put your questions in there, Paul's going to try to catch them and I'm going to try to catch them. It gets, it's a little hard to present and do the chat, but we're going to give it a try. I already had this open. You can do the thumbs up, thumbs down, and clap. I've got you open, but I'll be honest with you, it's going to be hard for me to kind of keep up with that and do the presentation. So, but you can certainly go back and forth. Okay. The next thing is annotations, and we already saw some people kind of playing with this. So if you go to your toolbar, now mine happens to be on the top, yours may be on the bottom. If you go to annotate, you can draw on the screen. And go ahead, everybody draw. Now the important thing is not to know how to draw. The important thing is to know how to clear. So after you draw, you need to be able to clear the individual things. So everybody draw and clear, draw and clear. All right. Exactly.
Okay, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but where do you do voice review options?
If you go to so under more controls, and then there's an annotate feature. And actually, ironically enough, mine isn't there. Why is mine not there?
I kept trying to grab the wrong toolbar.
I know. There's so many toolbars. Oh, mine's straight on the thing. So I drew on somebody's face. But be sure and do the clear. So everybody, let's go ahead and let's clear all of our drawings off and our stars and our happy faces, and because I can't do it for you. I don't think I can do a mega clear. Oh, clear all drawings. Oh, I can do it. Okay, how about that? All right, so I'm going to close that down. That makes sense. All right. Now the next thing is for Phil, because Phil is saying, how do I change the background? Because that's what everybody wants to do. Let's just get it out of the way, because everybody's going to be excited. Down on the video, there's a little up arrow check mark, and behind that is choose virtual background. And if you'll go in there and choose your virtual background, you can set it to, now I unfortunately am very dark, so I get eaten up by mine. But go ahead, change your background.
Oh no, just change that checkbox. I have a green screen. Yeah. You uncheck that, it'll work. There you go.
Oh, look at that. I moved the lights around. It wasn't working no matter what. I'm half invisible. But me and the Tiger King, this is us. I just wanted everybody to be able to get it out of their system, right? Because we're doing the presentation and I look over and you're in London, and then you're in England, and then you're in a field, and then who is that? Bill, you look too pat. Look at Bill, he's so happy. He's like, I'm in the field of poppies. I'm so happy. Okay, well
Some of us have computers that don't
Blue
meet
bonnets.
requirements.
Blue bonnets.
Oh no, blue bonnets. That's a very
Blue
Texas
bonnets
thing.
would make me happy.
Texas thing. Okay, so I think we got a little bit of that out of our system. So now this is a meetup. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to put you in a room with some other random people. How many people? 22. I'm going to create 4 rooms, and everybody's going to go in there, and I want you to introduce yourself to the other people in your room. So we're only going to do it. We're going to do 4 rooms, and we are going to automatically assign you, and I'm going to stop it like in 5 minutes. So I want you to introduce yourselves to somebody and tell them who they are. And here we go. Okay, Google, set an alarm for 3 minutes. I see you opting out of the rooms. What is that a picture of? Oh, good grief. That's you. You've been merged into the background.
I guess I'm too pale.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm too dark. Oh, I turn off the green screen. There's an option in there that says green screen. Turn that off and see if that doesn't fix it. You know, I realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm all caught up in the technology and I got to chatting. I'll do that in live sessions too. You get me chatting, you know. As a matter of fact, I wrote the first thing on my list was do an introduction.
Maybe if I had a different shade of
Like me, if I was a different shade of pink, I think it would work better.
how do I get the missing head?
You know, it's a light thing is the issue. You need to kind of, if you have a lightning is shining down on you. Oh, there we go. There we go. Oh, you were there for a second. Oh, you got more of your face for a second there. You're doing pretty good. Oh, you realize it's recording all this stuff. All this is going to be in the transcript. Hello, Anna. I stuck everybody, Anna, I stuck everybody in a Moodle room to introduce themselves. They'll be coming back here in just 50 seconds. And here people come back. You know, I realized that I didn't introduce myself. We were already talking, and we just kicked off and went. I know most of you, so it wasn't like it was a thing. 20 seconds, and everybody will start popping back in. Hopefully, you made a friend.
It's funny how yeah, like doesn't all come back at once.
Yeah, I haven't had this many people on at one time, and it actually was very slow assigning people to the rooms. Oh, is everybody back?
It's too fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry. I got
That
a little
was too
carried away.
fast.
I got carried away. But
Sorry.
We can do it again at the end. You know, I realized I was sitting here. I had a moment to think. I didn't actually introduce myself. It was on the first slide, and I know most of you. So my name is Hiram Kirkendall, and I'm the CTO over at MicroAssist. And you know, I've got a lot of material to cover, so I can do my pedigree and all the other stuff later. But if you have any question, just say Hiram, you know, what's up, and then carry away. So okay, we made it.
Hiram, you lost me on the last demo about doing the annotations. I never found the menu that you had the annotations on.
Oh, well, I tell you what, I'll do it again at the end because I've got about 2 hours worth of material, and people don't have 2 hours worth of patience.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll help do it
If
at
I'm
the end.
here in 2 hours, I'll be happy to see it.
Hiram, also, I believe Paul put it in the chat if that's
Oh, great.
accessible for you.
Great.
Super,
Yep.
Great.
thank you.
Mhm.
That's all I needed.
And here I can flip back to the slide real quick. So, I mean, it's right there. It's on that little green menu at the top. And if you do the drop down, there's that little drop down right there. It'll do annotations. And then that clear button, that's the one we're after, is that clear button.